All right. Wait, Joe, just mute your...
I know, well, that's what I'm just giving me 1 sec. That's, these little phones are more difficult than my big ones. We're getting there.
She gone? Is she gone? Okay. Hello, ladies. And thank you to those of you who are willing to have your faces on the screen because it's always difficult to speak into the void. So thank you, Miriam, and thank you. I don't know who I'm thanking. It just says iPhone, but thank you so much for being there. And thank you all the rest of you for being there as well. I'm not, but it's always nice to have 1 or 2 faces so you can see that there's actually really somebody listening. Okay. So the topic of tonight's class was stepping off the Tishrei roller coaster. Now what? So when a friend saw the title, she said to me, now what? You're supposed to go on holiday. I was like, well, there's the summarized version. The answer is go on holiday. But if that's not an option, I'm going to give you some other options. So now what? After we've just come out of this intense few weeks of all the chagim. So first of all, it's very important to know that we've just entered a very important time called Acharei HaChagim, which means officially after the Chagim. Now, what that time means is that since at least before Yom Tov and possibly even before the summer holidays, every time anybody asked you about committing to something, your answer might have been after the Yom Tovs. We'll worry about it after Yom Tov. We'll get back to that after Yom Tov. That's Acharei HaChagim. We have now entered that time period. Here we are, all the commitments that you may have put off and things that you didn't want to think about, that time has now begun. There's no summer holidays, there's no Yom Tovs anymore as an excuse. So now we've got to face all the stuff that we've put off. That's this time period called Acharei HaChagim, okay? But here we also are, having just entered the month of Cheshvan. We've just had Rosh Chodesh for the last 2 days. So we are very freshly and newly into the month of Cheshvan. And we may be feeling one of 2 things, okay? Either you're going to look at the calendar, the month of Cheshvan, and you're going to realize that nothing is happening in the month of Cheshvan. There's nothing on the calendar. There's no big event. There's nothing coming up that you have to prepare for other than Shabbos, but there's nothing unusual or out of the ordinary that you have to prepare for. So we've just come out of these last few weeks of fasting and feasting and davening and repenting and shaking and dancing, and now we've come into this month of nothingness. Now you might look at the calendar and either feel a great sense of relief and feel like, yay, I'm so happy that there's nothing happening because I need a month of nothing and I need to just recover, and you want to just take a breath. Or you might be looking at the calendar and feel some kind of a feeling of a little bit of an anticlimax because we've come out of a lot of intensity. And in a sense, there's also a great intensity in terms of a spiritual intensity. We've had a lot of a time of closeness with Hashem, opportunities to really kind of like be in that space. And now we've stepped into this month where there's a little bit of an anticlimax. There's no big thing happening. There's no big event to be looking forward to in this month. And maybe it might also feel like a bit of a diminishing in that contact or that connection with Hashem. So what are we supposed to do with this month? What should our approach to this month be? Should it be this kind of like a relief, or should it be this kind of a sad feeling, or what is it that we're supposed to approach this with? Now, no doubt, every woman who worked hard over Yom Tov is certainly, due some time out and a bit of a rest. So there's no problem with it being a sense of relief as well, but there must be more to it, because we know, and if we don't know, I'm going to introduce this concept tonight. So some of you who I've spoken to before will be familiar, because I've spoken about this idea before on the Wiser Woman Forum. The idea of the setup of the Jewish months. How do the Jewish months work? Okay, so I would have said before that the way that the Jewish calendar works is that instead of there being a date on the calendar that is put into the calendar because something happened, which is really how the secular calendar works, right? When an event happens, in order to mark that event, we write a date down on the calendar, and it looks like the Jewish calendar works the same way, right? Because all the chagim that we have marked down are there as a reminder of something that happened historically. So let's just randomly take an example of Pesach. right? So Pesach, the reason we're sitting at our Seder and the reason we're experiencing Pesach is because we're commemorating the fact that as a people, we got out of slavery, we walked through the sea, we came out to freedom. So it looks like the reason we put that into the diary is because we had this historical experience as a people, and we want to commemorate that. But that's not the right approach to really how the Jewish calendar works, because in fact, what we say is that at the very beginning of the creation of the world, the calendar was created as well. And when God created the months of the year, he invested each month of the year with a certain kind of spiritual energy. And because of the spiritual energy they invested in each month, that allowed certain events to take place. Okay. So in other words, what that means is that if we're talking about this concept of Nisan, of Pesach time, right? And the idea that the Jews became free from slavery during that month. What this concept is telling us is that actually the Jews couldn't have become free in any other month. It had to be in the month of Nisan, because whatever that spiritual energy of freedom is about, it was only invested to the month of Nisan. So we couldn't have walked out of that sea in any other month, but during that month. Now, the reason that that's really relevant to us in today's day and age, other than that being an interesting concept, is because if the idea is that the world was created with a certain energy invested in each month, then that must mean that that energy is still there right now. It runs all the way through from the beginning of the creation of the world till the end. So that means in 2022, we still have access to that same energy that was invested in that month. Now we have to find a way to use that energy and plug into it for spiritual growth. So in other words, in every single calendar month, whether it's something obvious, like last month and the month before of Elul and Tishrei, where it's obvious what you've got to be plugging into, there's so much going on. And in a month like this month, like Cheshvan, where it's not so obvious because there's nothing going on. And what are you supposed to plug into? Every single month has got some kind of spiritual energy and therefore some kind of opportunity for spiritual growth. And you just need to know where to plug your plug into. So every single month is there with a sort of like an output that it wants to give you. You got to know to where to recharge. If you know where to recharge and you know what the energy of this month is, you can walk out of this month in a spiritually different state to the way that you enter this month. So our question with every month, whether it's obvious or not obvious, is what is the spiritual work of this month? What is the growth opportunity in this month? What's the avoda I'm supposed to be doing this month? And no less with Cheshvan, which is not giving us a very obvious clue because there's nothing happening in this month. So, you know, it's easy when there's a chag. It's not easy when there's, I don't know, it's just like any other day. How are we supposed to relate to that? What is the energy invested in this? Now, again, for any of you who I have learned this with before will know that I'll always refer to one of the sources that we use to give us sort of clues on how to tap into this idea comes from the very, very first Kabbalistic source, which there's discussion as to whether Adam or Avraham was the original sort of writer down of this information. So it's not something that I've like paged through myself. This is something that we sort of derive this information and try and use it in a practical way in our lives. It gives us different hints as to the qualities held in every single month. So that means every single month has a tribe associated with it. Every single month has a Hebrew letter associated with it, which created that month. Every single month has a different order of the letters of Hashem's name. Every single month has a stone from the Choshen, from the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Every month has a body part associated with it. Every month has like a sense associated with it. Now, these things, while they sound very like esoteric and interesting, are also there to guide us to find our purpose in that month. So we have to somehow find a way to pull all those things together to give us a hint as to what is it that we're supposed to be deriving out of this month. So I'm going to try and allude to some of those as we speak to try and help us sort of pull out ways to grow through this month. Okay. And also this concept is the fact that if we start to tune into this idea that every month holds some kind of spiritual energy, every month is something that we can plug into, then that means that that idea exists on an even more microcosmic level. That means that actually every Shabbos, every day, every weekday holds some kind of like small power that's different to every day around it. So if you want to, now that's a very high way to live, tuned into that all the time, every single day. But another place to look for this is that even if you look at the parashas throughout the year, the week's portions throughout the year, they relate to something going on at this time. They give us a hint also. They fall at a certain time of the year. So they hint to something happening in the energy of that month as well. So in this month, there's a very interesting and obvious kind of link that's going to lead us to some clues as to how to process and grow through this month of Cheshvan. Okay, this past week, we read Parshas Bereshis. We read the story of the creation of the world. And what many of you must be familiar with is the basic story of the creation of the world, the story of what happens with Adam and Chava, with Adam and Eve. The story is that they're not supposed to partake of this tree that they've been told not to eat. You can have everything else, but you can't have this tree. And what is human nature is exactly the door that says don't enter, is the door that everybody wants to enter, right? That is exactly the tree that they partake of. And as soon as they partake of that tree, the whole sort of thing falls apart. They get kicked out of Gan Eden, they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and the rest of the world changes. The concept of our relationship with the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov completely changes. We're not living in that state of Eden anymore. The concept of death comes into the world. There's some kind of breakdown, and that's followed us right up until here we are today. Okay, now that's the familiar and most well-known kind of breakdown that takes place in the story. But there are some other smaller things that happen in that story that are not actually so small and have an effect on where we find ourselves today. Okay, in terms of things that we still have to be working with that went a bit askew after that story. So one of the things is this. There's a sorry, one second. Thank you. There is a sentence in the parasha that tells us, it says, Eitz pri oseh pri lemino. The trees were commanded, or actually the earth was commanded at the time of creation, that every tree that grew was supposed to, every fruit-bearing tree was supposed to have the same taste of the tree as the fruit. Okay, so in other words, if you were to take a fruit from an apple tree and you were to bite into that delicious apple, if you peeled the bark off the tree, the bark would taste exactly the same as the apple. So you'd get as much pleasure from eating the fruit that grew off the tree as to eat the branch or the twig or the trunk of the tree. Okay, you'd have equal pleasure. That's the way the world was originally created. Now, clearly we know that's not the way the world looks now, because if you were to try and eat the bark of any tree, you wouldn't have a pleasant experience. So that's not how the world looks right now. Something shifted and changed. But originally, this is how the world was supposed to look. The world was supposed to look that a tree and its fruit were both pleasant and delicious to partake of. So what changed? So it tells us that, in a sense, the earth chose to rebel. And it chose not to follow this instruction. It provided delicious tasting fruit, but it chose not to make its bark and its trunk delicious tasting as well. So the bark and the trunk were bitter, the fruit was delicious. It somehow deviated from Hashem's original plan for the world. Now, there's a few questions on this, some of which we'll get back to, to the answer of, like, how can the earth rebel? What does that mean? And actually it says that at the end of the story, to a degree, the earth also gets punished. Like, it gets noted that the earth didn't follow its instructions. Okay, how did the earth get punished? And also the timing of the earth's punishment is interesting, because it doesn't get punished when it produces this tree like this. It gets punished when Adam takes the apple or the fruit off the tree and partakes of that fruit. That's when the tree gets punished, or that's when the earth gets punished for not following instructions. So that's also a strange time to take note of that, because these trees were in existence already. Why was Hashem waiting for the moment where Adam actually took the fruit in order to kind of tell the tree that it had done the wrong thing, or tell the earth that it had done the wrong thing? So first of all, we need to make sense of a few questions there. But really, our number one question would be, why was this Hashem's original plan? Who would this exactly benefit? Why did the tree need to taste the same as the fruit? So if you want to get a fruit, you can pick a fruit of a tree. The fruit tastes delicious. Why do you need to have benefit from the bark of the tree? And that's not normally where you'd be partaking anyway. So what did it matter what the tree tasted like? Why did it need to be a sweet tasting thing? So in order to understand why Hashem originally created the world this way, we have to work on a principle which shows itself all the time, which is that what you see in the physical world is always a manifestation or a mirror of something happening in the spiritual world. So you've got to question when you see something like this, what's really going on behind this? What's the real concept behind this? It's not just that Hashem wanted you to have a nice bite of a bark of a tree. What is going on behind this concept? So the commentaries tell us that there are two stages of growth in life, or two stages of anybody's journey, okay? The first stage of anybody's journey is the bark or the roots or the tree part of the tree, okay? And that part of the tree is the growth part, it's the journey, it's the getting to what you're waiting for. It's the waiting for the fruit, for the tree to bear fruit, okay? So the whole, from when a seed is planted in the ground, and that tree takes root, and that trunk slowly grows, and then it grows branches, and the branches go twigs, and eventually you see some kind of something, and even halachically, you're not allowed to partake of that fruit in the first 3 years until that tree is like really doing its thing, right? Eventually, after that long amount of time, you'll see that tree bear a fruit, okay? And that fruit is likened to the second stage in a person's life, which is kind of like the fruit at the end of the effort, the work, the journey. It's the reward at the end, okay? So the tree is likened to sort of this growing path, this journey, the difficult part, the work, and the fruit is the reward, the prize, the thing you've been waiting for, okay? So what does it mean when it tells us that Hashem wanted to originally create a world where the tree tasted the same as the fruit? If this is a physical concept mirroring a spiritual concept, then what that means is that the way that the world is created is that Hashem wanted you to enjoy the journey and the work and the effort as much as he wanted you to enjoy the fruit, as much as he wanted you to enjoy the results of your efforts. But something changed, and there was some breakdown in the moment of Adam picking that fruit off the tree, and things changed. The tree didn't taste the same. The tree didn't taste the same as the fruit. And from that moment onwards, when the world shifted and changed since post-Gan Eden, we do not get the same enjoyment from the journey and the challenge and the hardship to getting there as we do from the fruit. That's not human nature. Human nature is that we want the fruit and we want it now. We don't necessarily want to go through the hard work and the effort. We'd like to cut to the chase and get to the last bit of it. We don't get the same enjoyment out of the work. If you ask most people, unless you are extremely blessed to work in something that you absolutely love, but I would say that most people are not necessarily blessed with that, right? If you ask somebody, why do you work? Their end goal is not going to be for the enjoyment I get every day out of my job. They'll say to support my family, to bring more money into my house, to be able to afford a vacation, to be able to have extra. It'll be something in terms of a goal. What's the end goal? Most people won't say, unless they're, again, working in something extremely fulfilling, that they really feel like they're meeting their talents or whatever, to be able to really feel like the experience or the journey is something as enjoyable. Okay, so it means that today, in today's world, in the post-Gan Eden world that we live in, our struggle is that we want to be at the destination already. We want to taste the fruit already. It's hard for us to travel the journey. And in fact, so often when there's challenges and difficult things in life, our mindset is a little bit like, when this bump in the road is over, I'll get to the real stuff, as opposed to the realization that actually the bump in the road is life. That's exactly, the bump in the road is the journey. It's actually the thing that's going to make the fruit sweeter. But it's hard for us to look at it like that. It's not inbuilt into us anymore. We don't get joy out of that part of the journey. Yes, there's certain challenges and experiences, and maybe we can, on a higher level, appreciate that there's some kind of growth happening. But human nature generally is we do not get the same joy from the journey as we do from the fruit. So if this is our struggle, and I'm laughing because when I was preparing this class, and I hadn't even gotten to this part yet, but my sister in South Africa sent me a picture of an avocado tree that she planted. And it's tiny, it's in a little pot plant, and there's tiny little like leaves coming out. And the next morning, just as a joke, I texted her to say, you know, how's your avocado on your toast this morning? Right now, of course, we know it's going to take like another 5 years for that tree to show even the slightest hint of an avocado coming up. But it is our nature to, okay, I planted the tree, where's the avocados? Who wants to sit around for 5 years now waiting for an avocado to show itself? Okay, we want to get the result now. So this breakdown is what we are working with today, is this concept of this time not being enjoyable. And if you think of any stage that we find ourselves in life, our job, our relationships, raising our kids. If you ask a person, like, what's your goal here? Would the goal be like, I want to bring up kids who I can marry off and send out into the world, and they're going to be that end goal? Is it the minutiae that take us up to that point where we can, have that fruit? And it's going to be the long, hard days and the potentially sleepless nights and all those things that lead up to that point. That's the work. That's the work. You don't get to see that end result for a very long time. So what that means is that really there are two aspects to a person's life. It's divided into two aspects. There is the aspect of doing, that's the fruit, the produce, and there's the aspect of being. Being is during the challenge stage, during the journey stage. A lot of it is just being on the journey. There's not a lot you can do. If you look at the tree growing for a very long time, you can't see a single thing happening. The tree is just kind of being in this state where it has to experience this growth that happens in order for at the end to do something, to produce something, to show you something at the end of it. Okay. Doing is the action thing that I can taste. That's like, something is there that I can see. And the thing that we have less of an appreciation for is the being. It's harder for us to get in touch with that. The growing stage. The many, many years it takes of something happening that nobody can see. I mean, even, for example, pregnancy is a brilliant example of this, because for 9 months, besides for a bump, there's no evidence in terms of the incredible process that's happening that nobody's seeing of this nothing turning into a full human being. And then only once that baby's born, that's the fruit, that's the doing, that's the birthing. Then you have something to show for it. But for 9 months, in a sense, a pregnant woman has to just be. She's not actively like growing the baby. It's growing inside her, but she's not, it takes energy but it's not an active process. It's sort of almost like happening. She's got to just be in that state of pregnancy in order at the end to sort of bear the fruit. That's where we see the evidence of her work. And if there was, for example, a farmer or somebody who works with the obvious aspect of this process, who couldn't be bothered to wait for this he'd never be able to grow fruit. If he wanted to rush this and said, like, all right, come on, where are the avocados? We planted them last week. He would not make a good farmer. You'd never get good fruit out of that. You need the process in order to get there. It reminds me, I remember once taking my son many, many years ago when he was around 5 to gymnastics classes. He'd never done gymnastics before. And I think their first exercises were like trying to balance on a bar, whatever it was. And at the back of the room, in the same room that they were doing gymnastics, was this group of kids called the Squad. And the Squad were these amazing children who came every single day for like 3 hours, every day of the week. I mean, these kids were getting ready for like the Olympics. These were like somersaulting and catapulting off like high beams and doing all sorts of incredible things. And I remember my son starting off gymnastics and looking at these kids and being like, I want to do what they're doing. Now I want to do what they're doing, right? Now, as an adult, you'd appreciate that there's no ways you could get to what those kids are doing unless you want to come here 4 days a week for 3 hours every single day and put your sweat and guts into it. And in about a year or 2 or 3, you'll start to see results and you'll be able to do what those Squad kids can do. But it definitely doesn't come from arriving at gymnastics once and suddenly that's where you are. But in the same way as you'd laugh at that and say that's so childish, we also are a little bit childish in that way because we don't always want to go through that process. I want to be there already. I want to be wise. I want to be complete in whatever this is. I just want to get to that stage. I want to go through the whole thing that you have to go through to get there. So what this all boils down to is that as human beings, which is funny because we are called human beings as opposed to human doings, okay? But the truth is that actually a lot of us struggle with the being part. A lot of us struggle with the just being, okay? And it's almost sort of like easier for us to relate to the doing part. And I think that we live in a world that encourages the doing and the result and the fruit and the thing that you see much more than the being, okay? To the degree that I think a lot of the time we validate ourselves on what we produce out of what we do. What do you have to show for it? You know, I was saying to a friend the other day, we were talking about how tired we were post-yontif, like, what are you doing? And we were talking about the fact that like it feels sort of almost sort of like taking advice, sort of like a bit too luxurious or a bit too like sort of extravagant, like to take the whole day out and just do nothing. You're going to sit with your feet up on a couch and just read. Like, who can afford time to do that? What do I have to show for it at the end of the day, right? There's things to be cooked, there's kids to be picked up, there's a house to clean, there's the never-ending list of a billion things to do. How could you sit on the couch and read a book all day? Now, who would be judging you? I think you would be judging you. There's nobody checking on you, but we have a hard time. Some people will relate to this and some people won't, but I do think that mostly this is the human condition. We validate ourselves in terms of how much we've done, what's there to see for it at the end. And look, in a lot of ways, that's how there is success in the world. But a lot of the time in our lives, we're going to be at different stages of different things in the being stage, in the journey stage, and we have a hard time with the being stage. We're not so good at relating to that. So it tells us that when Adam took the fruit, when he took that fruit off the tree, in the moment that the fruit got separated from the tree, the commentaries tell us that in that moment, that's when a shift happened, because it actually says that Hashem did want Adam to partake of the Eitz Hadas. He actually wanted him to eat that fruit, but not then. He wanted him to eat it on Shabbos. He wanted him to wait to eat the fruit. And it says that Adam couldn't wait to eat the fruit. He wanted the fruit and he wanted it now. And in that moment that he plucked that fruit off the tree, what he was really showing Hashem as a sort of mirror of all of us in a sense, what he was really showing Hashem is, I don't know how to relate to, and I'm not ready to just be. I need to do. I want the fruit now. I don't want to wait till Shabbos for the fruit. I want to see what it bears now. And in that moment, the world shifted because Hashem saw that Adam's not ready for the state of just being. So he's not ready for this tree, and he's not ready for Gan Eden. He's not ready to be in a state like this, because Gan Eden also was a state of being to a degree. There was not so much doing going on there. There was a lot of being. There was no concept of death in the world yet. There was nothing we were really fighting with. It was all everything was there. The world was perfect. So in that moment that Adam picked that fruit, it was almost symbolic of, you're not ready for a world like this. And in that moment, the breakdown happened. So from that moment of Adam saying, I can't wait till Shabbos, I need this fruit now, what he's really saying is, I can't sit in the moment. I need to get to the fruit. I can't appreciate the moment. So what does appreciating the moment mean? What does it mean to be able to be and to enjoy the journey? So part of being able to be present in the journey is that we have to value the moment that we find ourselves in. And the moment is sometimes mundane, and the moment is sometimes repetitive, and the moment is sometimes boring, and it's not always fireworks and excitement and Disneyland and the hug and the big thing. Sometimes it's just not the spectacular, it's just the regular day-to-day life. And if we were living in a world where we could appreciate the journey as much, and that's the place we're trying to get back to, we're almost trying to do like a tick on that, is get back to that place where we can embrace the journey, right? Is to get to this place of being able to be in the mundane as well and be present in it and have a sense of peace being in that place. We as human doings, more than human beings, are always rushing to get to the end of it. What happens next? What's coming up? What's next on the calendar? What do I need to do next? What's next? To the degree that we find it hard to be present in what we're doing now. I need to tick this off so I can get to the next thing that I need to tick off. You could spend a whole day just finishing the one thing to get to the next thing, to get to the next thing, to get to the next thing. So if you look at the punishments that are the result of the story of what happens in Gan Eden, they are also indicative of this concept, right? What's the way that the sort of punishment gets meted out at the end of the story? There's three characters that take place in the story, right? There's the snake, there's Adam, and there's Chava. What are the punishments they get? Which, if we were to discuss the story at a different time, we talk about the fact that it's not just a punishment, it's a tikkun as well. There's a lot of growth that can happen through those three things. It's not just Hashem saying, you were naughty, here's your punishment. It's actually Hashem saying, I'm going to give this punishment to you in a way that will give you also your deepest and greatest connection with me, okay? But if you look at the way that each of these are meted out, they are totally relating back to this idea. How's that? Okay, so the snake, what we know happened to the snake is that the snake used to walk on legs. And what happens to the snake at the end of the story is that his legs get cut off, and now he slithers along the ground and he eats dust and he eats whatever runs around in the ground. Now, really we know that the reason that he gets that as his punishment, which doesn't look like a punishment at all, because everything he needs is accessible to him. What a weird punishment. Like if you wanted to punish him, starve him, take his food away. But here you've put him exactly where he can access everything. So actually, the reason that's happened is because Hashem says to the snake, you know what, I'm not interested in establishing a relationship with you. So I'm going to give you everything that you need. So you never need to turn around to me and ask me for my help. You've got it, now go. There's a disconnect, okay? But really, what happens when the snake loses its feet? What are feet? Feet are the symbol of movement, of getting to the next place, okay? So what is his punishment? His punishment is he will no longer have joy out of the journey. He can't have joy out of the journey anymore. He's just slithering along the ground. He can't enjoy walking from point A to point B because now he's slithering in the mud. So his enjoyment of the journey is taken away. What is Eve's punishment? What's Chava's punishment at the end of the story? She has a punishment associated with childbirth, pregnancy, and actually also Sa'ar Gidel Banim, which is bringing up children, right? Now, actually, that whole stage was meant to be enjoyable. It was meant to be as enjoyable to be pregnant and give birth as to have the baby, okay? But her punishment or her challenge is that there was no longer the same type of enjoyment from that process as to see the fruit at the end of it, that she'd have all sorts of, things that would be difficult for her during that time. And only at the end, bringing that child would be the fruit that she could kind of relate to. And what about Adam? What's his punishment at the end of the story? So we know that he has to, by the sweat of his brow, he's got to toil the land, right? He's got to make a living. He's got to support his family, but it's going to be with difficulty. It's going to be by the sweat of his brow. So it tells us that in the time of Gan Eden, there were loaves of bread hanging off the tree. You wanted to access fruit, or you had to just reach out and pick it off. And in the time of Mashiach, it'll look like that again. So what happened during this in-between period, this time where through the sweat of his brow, he's going to have to earn himself a living, right? Is that the process of getting bread is going to be really difficult. It's going to be hard to get bread. He's going to have to struggle. He's going to have to be part of the rat race. He's going to have to be anxious and worried about whether he has a job. Will his job be okay? Will he get enough? Will he's, is what he's receiving at the end of the month? There's going to be a constant kind of stress associated with that. It's never going to be like, it's all good and you can be guaranteed that it's good forever. He's going to have a struggle in that area. So as well, it's not a given that he'll enjoy the journey of that. A lot of people would say they don't enjoy the journey of that, and there's a lot of stress involved in the journey, but the fruit is the money that you make at the end of it, or being able to support a family, or having something to show for it at the end. So all three of them, we can see at the end of the story, they've been taken away this opportunity of enjoying the journey. The journey is not fun anymore. The journey is not enjoyable anymore. The focus is only now on what's going to be at the end of this. A baby, a parnasa, whatever it is that's the end of this. But the process to get there is not necessarily going to be enjoyable. And this concept can play out in all scenarios in our life, okay? And certainly in relationships. So how does this play out in relationships? So I'll give you an anecdote, which may or may not be relatable, but I think we can apply this to many other things and find examples that would resonate with us. So there's a husband who, it's his and his wife's 20th anniversary, and he takes it on that he is going to be the one to organize the evening, okay? He's going to make it a very special evening for the anniversary. So he's booked a really fancy restaurant, and after that, he wants to take her somewhere, in town, walking around somewhere beautiful that she can see town and see the lights, and then they're going to go to a really nice coffee shop, and then they're going to make the drive home, but he wants to make sure that the whole evening is really, really something special to remember. So as they set off on their journey and he's following ways to get to the restaurant that they've booked, he's just busy being in touch with the restaurant to make sure that their table is definitely booked, and he's checking that he's definitely got the right directions, and has he found the right place to park that's near enough to the restaurant so she won't have to walk too far on her high heels. And then as soon as they get into the restaurant and they sit down in the restaurant, he's just quickly checking through the menu to make sure they have the best possible thing to eat. And once they've ordered the menu, he's already looking on his phone to make sure what is the nearest nicest place to walk around, where we're going to go, what's my plan from here, how will we get there, should we drive, do we walk? And then as soon as they're walking around the place that they're walking around, he wants to make sure that the coffee shop that he was originally planning is the right coffee shop, and what time are they open until, and is it near enough walk from where they are. And as soon as they get to that coffee shop, then he's busy planning their way home. And when he's sitting in the car planning the way home, he's already planning work for the next day. So when they get home, his wife says to him, look, you planned a beautiful evening. You really did an amazing job from beginning to end. You've made such beautiful things happen for our 20th anniversary. I just don't feel like you were there. I don't feel like you were actually with me during the evening. So it was a lovely plan, but I don't actually feel like you were present at all. Okay. That is called being in the doing and not in the being. In other words, instead of being in the moment of being in the restaurant, walking around wherever you're walking around, being in the coffee shop, your head is already on what's the next thing. And it might be with the best intentions. Look, he was just trying to make her anniversary nice. It wasn't like he was ignoring her, right? But his mind is already onto the next thing. Do, tick it off on the list. What's the next place that I have to be? So the struggle of being in the moment, that she really feels like, I don't feel like you were present with me. You were there, but you weren't there, right? So if we want to form deep relationships with the people around us, that's our kids, that's our friends, that's our spouses. If we want to form deep relationships with people around us, the truth is that that doesn't really happen in the exciting firework, Instagrammable moments, okay? That actually more happens in the mundane, quiet, in-between moments. That's where a relationship is formed, not in Disneyland. In the quiet, in-between, neither here nor there, just regular day-to-day life, interactions. You know, if a parent feels like the only thing their child will remember is we've got to get them to Disneyland so they'll have that amazing experience to remember, that's not really what, I mean, they might remember that as a wonderful experience, but that's not really, if the in-between moments are not good, Disneyland's not going to save the situation. Okay, it's the smaller moments of just being and being together that really make an impression and that really carry a child through. And in a relationship as well, imagine a husband who's never ever present, but then, you know, there's a beautiful piece of jewelry at the end. That piece of jewelry doesn't make up for the not being present. It's the being that counts much more in a certain sense than the doing, right? So what we're trying to access and what we're trying to master and what's totally present in the month of Cheshvan is something called Yishuv Hadas, which is being able to have a presence of mind, a clarity, an inner peace, an ability to sit in exactly the place that you find yourself and just be there, 100%, whether you're talking to somebody, whether you're cooking supper. Now, this is not easy, okay? This is not easy. I'm telling you, as somebody who, this is, you know, I'm going to work hard this month to try to access this. To not have your checklist of what's next doesn't get you there faster, by the way. You're still going to get through the thing that you get through. So if, for example, having an interaction with your child where while you're talking to them, your mind is on what's the next thing, or having a proper interaction where you can look at their face and look in their eyes and speak to them, what a difference in an interaction. That's how deep relationships are formed. And that comes from this place of Yishuv Hadas, of a comfortableness and an ability to just be and to be present in the moment. And in fact, the last 2 days of Tishrei give us a hint as to what's upcoming in this month of Cheshvan. Because what are the last 2 days of the Chag? Not the last 2 days of the whole month, but the last 2 days of the Chag that's been ongoing since Rosh Hashanah. The last 2 days are Shmini Atzeret and Simchas Torah. Now, we might do a lot of things surrounding that. Okay, so if I say to you that Simchas Torah is actually meant to be a really, there's actually halachically not anything that you have to do on the day. Not on Shmini Atzeret and not on Simchas Torah. Now, you might say to me, Simchas Torah is the most hectic day of the whole thing. There was the dancing and the shul and the sweets and the kids and the entertaining, but actually none of those things are things you have to do on Simchas Torah. And in fact, many people don't sit in the Sukkah on Shmini Atzeret. So, and there is a strong minhag to dance with the Torah, but it's actually not like halachically brought down like that. So actually, if you were to look at those 2 days, there's nothing specific happening in those 2 days. There's nothing you have to do. There's nothing you have to specifically do to mark the day. You know what you have to do on the day? Hashem says, you know what? It's been such a hectic few weeks. You've fasted, you've feasted, you've shaken that lulav, you've danced with me, you've come, you've gone, you've a million things that you've cooked and you've put so much effort into this. You know what I want you to do for these last 2 days? Just come sit with me and just be. There's nothing else you need to do. Just sit with me, because you know what a real relationship with Hashem is? It's not just in the fireworks and the events and the big happenings. It's in the taking out your siddur on an average Tuesday morning and having time to have a few words with Hashem. Or not even taking out the siddur and just having a few words with Hashem and including him in your life. It's the in-between, average, non-eventful, non-firework moments that are part of the relationship as well. And when you look at the month of Cheshvan, it's not a month of nothing. It's not that nothing's happening here. It's that this is the month to work on being, because there's nothing in your way to stop you from being and making you do. Last month was such a month of doing. It was non-stop doing. This month presents us with this incredible opportunity to work on being, on Yeshiv Hadas, on presence, on being in the moment, on those moments when you're sitting with Hashem and it's just you and Hashem, and it's just you and your husband, and it's just you and your kid, and it's just you and your friend, and it's just you and the rest of the world, with no big things happening in the background. That's real life. It's more ordinary, it's more extraordinary what happened last month than the month before. So it's a stark contrast between all this intensity last month and then walking into this where there's not a lot happening. But the not a lot happening is an invitation to invest in this ability to just be able to be comfortable with being, to find a sweetness in the being, like Hashem wanted it to be when he created the world, that he wanted you to get a joy out of the journey as much as he wanted you to get a joy out of the fruit. So finding a way to settle myself in the moment that I'm in and not try to work out what's next, that's your challenge for this month. And it's not easy because we all have a lot of things to do and life is busy. Life's busy. Most of us don't have the time necessarily to just sit around and, but it's not about that. It doesn't mean don't do the things that are expected of you. It means whatever you find yourself doing now, be there in that moment. When the next thing you have to do will come up anyway, and then you'll be there in that moment, especially when it's interactions with people. So I was listening to somebody talk about a tzaddik who is called the Amshanova Rebbe. I don't know if anybody has ever had a contact or heard of him or who he is. I can't explain to you how the thing that he's known for is that he keeps very interesting zmanim. He keeps very interesting times of things. He does like Havdalah on a Tuesday, and he keeps Yom Kippur, he fasts till like a next day. He takes everything to the sort of like extreme. I can't explain to you how it is and why it is, but he's a very holy and wise tzaddik. So we'll take it that he has lots of sources for what it is that he does, right? But he is very immersed in a world of time, but in a different sense than the way most of us live time. But it's said that somebody's, and he's sort of like, his every davening of his takes hours and hours, so that it makes him a little bit later for the next davening. So somebody said to him, the fact that you daven whatever next tefillah is at whatever time, there is a way to solve that, If you actually davened mincha on time and got through that mincha, you'd be able to daven the ma'ariv on time. Like everything takes such a long time that of course the next thing is going to be, late. And he responded to the student with an absolute sort of almost like shock at that. He said, but when I'm davening mincha, all I'm doing is davening mincha. I'm not thinking about what time ma'ariv is going to be and how I'm going to get there and whether I'm going to, all I'm doing in this moment is just davening mincha. That's where I am. Imagine that. Imagine being able to access that. It's hard, but this is the month that presents that opportunity. And in every month that provides a certain opportunity or energy, that is the month to grab that thing if you want that to be a reality in your own personal life. In other words, there's no easier month to access the concept than in the month that Hashem provides the energy for it. So this person who was talking about the Amshanova Rebbe said, he does this thing on Hanukkah where he takes like the whole night lighting his Hanukkah candles and davening with his Hanukkah candles. And in the morning, he has people queuing up for him to give them a bracha. So the entire night since candle lighting till the next morning, he's been lighting and davening, okay? And then he greets people and he gives them brachas. So this man was saying he'd been to him for a bracha. Now, what does this man feel like? He hasn't slept the entire night. He's been in like intense communion with Hashem. And now it arrives at the next morning and there's 100 Hasidim standing outside his door, each one waiting for a bracha. So he describes his experience of his face-to-face experience with this Rebbe. And he says, he said, he only said 4 words to me. I can't remember what the words were. He said a Freilich, a Chanukah, and something else. Like he didn't say anything it wasn't the words that he said. He said, in those minutes that he spoke to me, I felt like not one other person existed in the world. He wasn't thinking about how many more people are on the line and how long is this going to take me, when am I going to get to sleep? He said, the way he spoke to me, he looked me in the eyes, and I felt like nobody else existed in the world. Imagine being able to give another human being that feeling when you communicate with them. Nothing else matters. Doesn't matter what I'm on to next. Doesn't matter what's the next. We know how we'd feel if somebody was attentive to us in that way. If when a person spoke to you, they were really speaking to you and not thinking in the back of their head, what's next in my diary? Where do I need to be in 15 minutes? To really, truly, deeply connect with someone means you need a sense of a yeshiva das, a sense of slowing down the time and just being and embracing being exactly where you are in this moment and nowhere else. So that's why this month is not full of a million things you have to do. Yes, there's the background of life's practicalities, but there's no chag you have to get ready for. There's nothing specifically you have to rush and put in the calendar. And if you are, you might be bringing it upon yourself that it has to be as hectic as it has to be. It's something some of us need to rethink. Like, quieten down this month. Don't commit to a million things you don't have to commit to. Work on the being, not the doing. That's the opportunity in this month. And it actually tells us that when a person came to the Beis Hamikdash, when a person came to visit the Beis Hamikdash, it says he had to take his shoes off. Now, it seems on a sort of superficial level, it's respectful. You're going into a holy place, you take your shoes off. Why did he take his shoes off? Because shoes are symbolic of movement, of travel. Where am I on my way to next? Hashem says, you want to come visit me in the Beis Hamikdash? I don't want you thinking about where you're going next. If you're here, I want you to be here. Take your shoes off. Don't think about what's next on the agenda. Just be here. Just be with me. It also tells us that when the Jews were Ola la Regel, when 3 times a year they had to make a trip to Yerushalayim to go be with Hashem, right? You were not allowed to leave on Motzei Yontif. You had to wait until the next morning. Why? For the same reason, that the minute Yontif ends, you're already packing your bags and getting ready, and when we're leaving, when's the transport leaving? Yontif just ended. Just be. Just grab onto those moments without rushing to the next thing. Go to sleep, rest, relax. Tomorrow we'll face whatever it is that needs to happen. So not this idea of rushing and racing onto the next thing. If you look at the structure of the name of the month, the word Cheshvan, the beginning of the word chash is associated with the word like hash, that the instruction in the name of the month of Cheshvan is telling you, shh, just be still. Just listen. Listen to what opportunity is available in this month if you just stop. And when I told you originally that there's a lot of different things associated with this month, which come from Sefer Yetzirah, this book of formation, that there's a letter associated with the month and a body part associated with this month. So this month, the sense, the bodily sense associated with this month is a sense of smell. Now, the sense of smell is very interesting because it's actually it's meant to be a very spiritual sense. It actually talks about the fact that Moshiach will be able to smell which tribe each person belongs to, whatever that means, okay? But what do we also know about the sense of smell? Is that the sense of smell is associated with breath, with breathing. That this is a month of slowing down, and being and breathing are very associated with each other. You see that in all mindfulness practices and meditation, breathing is very key to that. Just slow down and breathe. Slow down and smell the roses. It's very deeply connected to breath. We need to learn how to breathe. And some of us really do need to learn how to breathe. We don't know how to. We're so busy with where we are like sort of holding our breath all the time. We're not good at breathing. Take good, deep breaths this month. Go for slow walks and take deep, good breaths. That's how we'll sort of like recuperate from what we experienced the last month. And we know that if we're connecting this to the time that we find ourselves in, we're about to move on to the next parsha, which is the parsha of Noach. And this is so tied into, just as we started Cheshvan, now moving on to the parsha of Noach. What does it tell us about Noach? It says that, first of all, the name Noach is about calm, stillness, being. And what do we know about what Noach's life looked like? Is it tells us the first time we find the concept of smell is in the Torah in this week's parsha of Noach. It says that when Noach came out the ark, he brought a korban, and it brought a reach nichoach to Hashem, a pleasant smell to Hashem. Now, wherever you find a concept for the first time, again, this is a physical reality mirroring a spiritual reality. What's it really telling us? What's the lesson in the first time that it mentions this? So it says that Noah has this ability, this smell ability, to bring smell into the world, to bring breath into the world, to bring calm into the world. And if you look at his life's activity, what did Noah spend his life doing? He spent 120 years building an ark. I don't know how many of you here are creative or into doing projects. And I don't know how many of you could last longer than a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 5 months, maybe, on a project. Anyone here for 120 years of building an ark? Do you know how much yishuv hadas and presence and ability to just be you need for an 120-year project? You need to be Noach. You need to be seriously calm. You need to know how to breathe and be, okay? And in fact, that's why he was chosen as the man for the task, because look at his job. He lived in an ark with every animal in existence and had to meet their needs 24 hours a day. If you think that a baby and maybe 2 babies are crying, can you imagine every animal that needed every different food and was mooing and braying and moaning and whatever sounds they make all at the same time? He didn't lose it. He met the needs of all of them and his children and his wife and his family with calm. So we're moving, as Cheshvan begins, into this parsha of another lesson on presence and being and embracing this month that looks like it's bringing us nothing, but is bringing us an enormous opportunity for growth by reminding us to just be still and to just be and to be present in the moments of supposed nothingness. But there's a value in that. It's not let's just get this time over. There's a value in being able to be present in this time of nothing. We want to return to this place where the bark tastes the same as the tree, where the joy and the sweetness is the same. And if we can work on that in this month, and we can try access that in this month, we can bring a kind of a tikkun, like a correction to the world that broke down at the time of the creation of the world. We can start to heal that. And as we heal that, we get closer to the time of Mashiach. And interestingly, this month has a lot of association with Mashiach, but we'll have to leave that for another time. But we're aiming to get to that place. And I think each one of us, no matter how calm you might be or not calm, everybody has space to include this in their life. Look for a space where you can find the room to breathe and be present wherever you find yourself. This is a month for working on presence. Okay, I'm taking it on as well. So I'm not lecturing on this. I'm sharing this idea with you so we can all kind of work on this in this coming one. It's a challenge since the beginning of the world, it's a challenge that we still have now, and we want to try and bring Mashiach and get back to that state. So I wish you all luck with this month's project of the breathing and the being. So we all deserve a break. Take that break, but don't take that break as a time to opt out of the month. Opt in and appreciate this as a value to be in this place of just being. I wish you all a beautiful, meaningful, calm, and connected month of Cheshvan, and thank you all for being here.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me? Am I back with you? Good.
You're back with us.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And I'm breathing. I'm standing here in the foyer, breathing and calm. And I will work on that while I'm finishing. In the meantime, I actually am in the